This week, we are joined by the past week's Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week, Daniel Wingate. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Let's start right there. Let's talk about this past week, the Wisconsin game. Obviously, you guys had high expectations going in. I assume that game exceeded your expectations. What were your just immediate thoughts after that game once it concluded?
The immediate thought from just the team was just the fact that, we played a dominant 4 quarters and we did what we set out, what we did with the game plan was, just going out there, playing hard, playing physical, playing fast, and playing to our standard.
Going into the game, I know there had been a lot of talk about the fact that this Maryland team in the past couple of years had a lot of trouble on the road in the Big Ten, and you guys pretty much squashed all those kind of narratives. Is that something that the team was kind of fired up about after the game?
For sure, just being able to go in their stadium, a stadium where it's a loud environment, an environment where they basically have another player on the field with their crowd. It was just, good to be able to go in there and do what we had to do and, shut the crowd up and get out.
The one thing I've noticed in the past couple of weeks about this, Maryland team and the defense as a whole is just the general discipline. The jump you guys have made from, the first quarter of week one until now. What do you think has led to just the general cleaning up some of those penalties and playing a much cleaner game of football?
Just knowing the not beat ourselves, knowing that when we get into conference play, we can't have penalties like that, just racking up penalties. It's not good for our team. It's not good for, just being able to win. So being able to cut those penalties out and not beating ourselves.
Obviously, on the defensive side of the ball so far this year, a lot of the younger guys, a lot of the freshmen have stepped up. What have you kind of viewed your role as a leader, kind of mentoring some of those guys, and have you enjoyed that role?
I see my role as just being able to make sure those guys, keep a good head on their shoulders and, to play to the standard that we set out for ourselves. I enjoy the role 100%, just being able to have those guys lean on me if anything goes wrong or if they're struggling, just being able to be an older guy that can, help them out, just like how I had older guys like Dante Trader, Ruben Hippolyte, just being able to be that for them and letting them know, like, we're going to have mistakes here and there, but as long as you continue to play your game, everything will be good.
Hey, Daniel, there was a lot of talk this offseason about all the production you guys would be losing. I just want to know, as a returning player on this defense that's bringing in a lot of new faces, did you take any of the kind of offseason criticism or maybe poor projections that a lot of people had on this defense personally?
Yeah, a lot of us took that personally, just off the fact of, we knew what we had at this program and the players we had and the team we had and just being, doubted by everybody else and some even, our own fans doubting us saying we're only going to win 3 games. You take stuff like that personally, and it was just something that we were given, like that's giving us motivation and it's something that, we're sticking to throughout the year. We're not allowing the media to get to us, now that we're winning and we're still remembering all the talk of us not having a successful season and all that.
I was reading a little bit about you, and I saw that you've been to Thailand. Can you tell us a little bit about that trip and just some of the unique talents you had? You're a singer at Big Ten Media Day. What is Daniel Wingate like off the field, man?
Daniel Wingate off the field is just, a chill guy that likes to enjoy his time, with friends and family. Went to Thailand with my girlfriend and some family and just, got out there to relax, just get away from football for a little bit and to just, live life the way it's supposed to be lived. And then, just off the field, I'm just a guy that, is chill, likes to sit back, play video games, do regular things that regular people like to do.
Why do you think having some of those other interests, being musically inclined, traveling the world, why do you think that's important for a football player like you?
I think that's important because, sometimes not even just as a football player, as an athlete, you can get wrapped up within the sport and that can take so much time over of your life and, you can get stressed out off of it. It affects the mental a lot, and just being able to have, outside sources that take your mind off of that, I think is something that really helps you as a student athlete and just as like mentally for a student athlete, just being able to, get away from it and enjoy life on the other side.
Before we get back to the show and our interview with Daniel, a quick word from our sponsor. The Catalyst to the Game is brought to you by Catalyst Hot Dogs. Catalyst brought the Jersey Dog to the DMV. Featuring premium dry-aged Black Angus all-beef hot dogs made in Maryland, They serve it with handmade toppings, including hot onions, relish, and their signature Texas chili sauce. And don't miss, definitely don't miss, their original garlic knot dogs. Catalyst always offers vegans dogs as well as gluten-free buns because Catalyst has food for everyone. Find them in CQ Stadium in Section 14 and the Xfinity Center in Section 210. Tell the people, guys, it's official. A hot dog is a sandwich. All right, now here's more from Under the Shell.
What was, when you were in Thailand, what was like your most unique experience that you had, and what was your favorite part about that trip?
My most unique experience, I would say, they had this water park out there, and I've been to a lot of amusement parks, and that might have been like my favorite one. It was just so many unique slides out there, and honestly, just like a different vibe. Like, it was different from a water park that you could find out here in the States, and it was just a fun experience. Different for sure.
Did you try any crazy foods?
We did try some crazy food. I forgot what it was called, but their food down there is so different than the food up here. It's all of it tastes different. I was having waffles down there, and it didn't even taste like a waffle. It's crazy.
Back down to kind of on the football field, Loxley's compared you a lot to EJ Henderson. I know he came by the other week. What talks have you had with EJ, and how much are you kind of looking at this season as almost a chance for you to really establish yourself on NFL draft circles and such?
I haven't had much talks with EJ, but we need to change that because I need to get some words of wisdom from him. But honestly, for this season, just trying to be the best linebacker I can be in the nation, and then just being the best teammate I can be, just in all aspects. I'm trying to do everything I can to let people know who's here at Maryland and the talent that we have here, just putting on for the state and putting on for my people, honestly.
Talking about some of those teammates, what's the first impression you had of Sidney Stewart and Zahir Mathis? Like, do you have something from the offseason where you're like, holy shit, like these dudes are for real? Like, or was there any plays that they made or anything that stood out to you? Because freshman edge rushers don't usually make this sort of an impact,
Yeah. Fall camp. I could just say the whole fall camp, I'm seeing those two come off the edge, and I'm like, man, those guys are going to be something special. They just have such a motor and such a good mindset and a good head on their shoulders with just how things operate right now. And they're always going 100%. That's what you want from your teammates. That's what you want from a player. Somebody's going to always go 100% and give their all. And that's something that they always do that really pops out with them.
I think Sidney Stewart off the field has really embodied that confidence, which is also not something you usually see from, a freshman. What have your like talks been with him about just like, controlling what he says publicly, but also, obviously he's been backing up his play.
Just letting them know, for sure, just being yourself, but also just, making sure that you're not getting too overly confident and not saying too much of crazy things. He's just a kid that wants to go out there and ball and prove himself every week. So you can't, like, what he says, he really means it. Like, everything those two say, they really mean what they say, and it shows on the field.
What's been your kind of toughest point last year? There was a lot of talks about the locker room kind of crumbling and so on and so forth. And it's easy to say, oh, let's change the culture. But can you just tell us, like, at what moment last year did it really hit you that maybe it wasn't what it was supposed to be? And how did you go about personally kind of making sure that it was different this season?
The moment I knew it wasn't what it was supposed to be, where I think we lost to Northwestern, you started to see the shift within, the team and how people were carrying themselves, just like starting to get more negative, more division throughout the locker room. It was something that really, didn't sit well with me because I've been on a few losing teams, but no matter what, you don't ever go against the guys that are going with you every play. And that's just something I try to carry over to this season, like no matter what, we just got to continue to stay as a team, stay as a family, to not go against each other, because once we beat each other, then, at that point, there's literally nobody else that's going to be there for us. So just making sure to keep the team together and to let them know, like, we might go through some adversity, we might go through some up and downs, but at the end of the day, we all we got.
A lot of it was centered around NIL. What's changed this year to make sure that there's no conflicts between kind of the name, image, and likeness and money?
people have made it to where we just got to keep it football. We made it known like in leadership meetings that we're not trying to be watching nobody's pockets or nothing. Like the end goal is the NFL, and that's where you're going to get the real money. So why be so worried about what somebody else is making now? And if you got a problem with your NIL, then go play better.
Was this something that, a lot of people on the team were like, the messages you're sending about, keeping it focused on the play on the field? Was that something, a small group of players spread to the team really? Who was the people behind those messages?
The returning guys, the guys that were in the locker room last year were relaying that message. And then just, our new leaders that came in, like Malik, when he came in, he made it his voice to say it's not about the money. It's not about what anybody else is getting. And that's really what it was. All of us returning guys knowing what it's like, hearing it throughout the locker room, and then just saying, like, we're not doing that this year. We're going to switch it up and we're going to change the culture around.
I mean, you pointing out a freshman who's, I think, 19 years old is kind of a leader is pretty impressive to hear. You've played a lot of football. How surprising is it for him to walk in and you can be a leader on the field, but it seems like he's really embraced kind of being somewhat the face of the program and taking that head on. How impressed just have you been with who he is and the maturity he's shown?
I'm impressed 100% because he's, like you said, a freshman getting all this recognition, all this award, like all these little things. And he's not somebody, that he lets it get to his head. He starts to get cocky and arrogant. He stays the same. He's the same humble guy that he was when he came in here. That's the one thing that sticks out with me, his maturity and the fact that he doesn't let no highs nor lows face him. Like, he's going to stay the same no matter what. And that's something that, as a team, like, you're going to naturally migrate to somebody like that, somebody that's positively impacting our team.
Looking forward for the rest of the season, obviously the bye week comes at a bit of a weird time. You guys have a ton of momentum after winning 4 games, getting the win at Wisconsin. What's just like kind of the general thoughts during this bye week to stay focused on the Washington game, but also not lose the momentum you guys have had through the first 4 successful weeks?
Yeah, just being able to get our bodies back. It is a weird time to have a bye week, but at the end of the day, it also helps us out because we have some guys that got nicked up and we need them for the rest of the season. So this bye week was obviously an emphasis of just, getting our bodies back and getting back to 100%. So then when we come back for Washington, it's like a drop off never happened. So just honestly staying consistent and staying focused on what the goal is. We're still thinking about being 1-0 each week. So the momentum shouldn't be a factor. The bye week shouldn't be a factor of our momentum because at the end of the day, we're still trying to come out each week and be 1-0.
I think there was a lot of talk about Jayshon Barnum when he was here about his pass rushing, and I think a lot of fans wanted to see him play a little bit more edge. He's playing edge now at Michigan. You've had a couple of nice pass rushing moves, especially on blitzes, and they played you a bit and pieces off the edge over your career here. How much do you feel like you can show off the edges? Does Wingate got some bend there and pass rushing chops, or are you a straight Mike at this point?
Wingate got some edge on there, you feel me? Got a few moves for him, but in certain packages, you gotta keep it to certain things. I already got Sidney Stewart as Zahir Mathis off the edge, so why should I even try to compete? I gotta hold down the middle.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we appreciate you hopping on, man. Good luck against Washington next week. Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate you guys for having me.